So I'm really excited that we're starting this conversation and this walkie-talkie from one of the most iconic galleries in Torino, Franco Noero, like a classic of Artissima, and an incredible artist, Anna Boghiguian. So maybe you can start by telling us how you discovered this small painting and why it resonated so much for you.
So first we saw it without even noticing that it was Anna Boghiguian. Then we started to ask questions about that specific work. Anna Boghiguian is a quite recognized and international artist, but very apart. And I'm obsessed with artists which open doors for other ones. And Anna Boghiguian, for me, she's one. The way she behaves, the fact that she's an Armenian but living in Cairo, making stories all around the world. And in that small work, I think there's all the violence of the world and the fear. And it's also a portable work because she was moving all the time. So she made small size like that she can carry on her pockets. Because she's we say in French, a citoyen of the world.
A citizen of the world, yes.
For me, she is one.
And Franco was telling me, I was talking to him before, that canvases are very rare in her practice because, of course, moving around, the canvas has a certain thickness and it's not the usual thing that you would have to carry with you. So these two little portraits that are presented here are quite special in her productions, and she defines them encounters. That's how she describes them as, we don't know who it's portrayed, we don't know the encounters. We know that mostly are happening in Canada during the second war in the Gulf in 2010. And so, as you were saying, I think the work embodies very strongly this kind of violent reaction. And here we see it quite clearly,
And it also spoke about the materiality of the use, that she used the finger to go in, that it was a violent component. I forgot the name of the product.
Encaustic.
Yeah, encaustic.
And the encasting itself is also a dangerous means to use on canvas because it's toxic and reveals a thick materiality of the paint that amplify this feeling of violence and anger. I think this is fantastic for this work.
And for you as a collector, like how do you relate? Because you have a beautiful collection that is made of like a lot of female artists, for example. You have a lot of interest for that, and but this seems to be quite strong as a presence compared to other works that I've seen in your house.
Absolutely, it will be very unusual. But when I stopped in front of this painting, three things got me: the size, that is incredible, the technique that we talk about, the encaustic, and the image, the rage. But for me, it's an image of rage. We don't know who this person is. We don't know why he has the rage. What we see is rage. And as Caroline said, Anna, they paint this following encounters. But maybe this painting, instead of talking about the painter, the painted, talk a lot more about the painter. So I think what she's saying is depicting a feeling of her, that her inner being is related to all of us have anger. She has anger.
Well, and I mean, recontextualizing this in the present, like a work that depicts a man who reacts to violently with disgust. And this is a face that communicates disgust for war. I mean, in a moment like what we're living right now, with it's just the very point. And Anna has this practice of transforming historical events or like mediating historical events into her work, like the exile. She being from Armenian origin and exiled between Cairo and Canada. This is something that comes across often.
But it's also the strength of her work. When it stays in time, it always gets a different meaning. Or add meaning. Yeah. And obviously with what's happening in Gaza and what's happening in Ukraine, we are facing that every morning in a way. Well, for the people. And also in a larger way, I love the fact to speak about a rage that we all know. We were discussing things with racism earlier on. this is a range too. There's a lot of different range. It could,
But rage is part of human being. It's all a question how you deal with this. So everyone has him inside of us. So this, I think, the great thing about Anna. And the thing that you said about the fact that she's a nomad is she encountered person that is a trace of our human being, and then she carries it with her. So at the end, she carries humanity.
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. Well, let's leave it here. And I think it's interesting, Caroline, knowing you, that we started from a small work, because you are an incredible curator. We've known each other for a very long time, and you are an advisor of the called Pinault collection, which is one of the most important collections in the world. But you have a small collection yourself, and I know that you have a focus actually on small works.
small size. First, now I live in a larger apartment, but I was living in a tiny apartment. And I always, I had to share my life with the works of art. For me, they're friends, I speak with them. Then I'm profoundly convinced that a painter, if he can do a small size, he can win the rest. A large painting or large drawing or large whatever, there's always the sensational and
Pressing with scale.
if you think of one of my favorite, for example, Marlène Dumas, Mama Roma is that size, and it's a masterpiece. The masterpiece is not regarding the size, it's regarding the wreath and the content, including in that small painting by Anna Boghiguian. I think it's a fantastic work, but it's more difficult. And I've met some artists who lie. I mean, they play their big size to hide what they cannot do. And the same thing in sculpture. Not in video, but in sculpture.
And I find incredibly interesting that you mentioned that the beginning of this was also like simply a limitation imposed by your apartment, because this relates very much to the work that we're seeing now with Khaled Jarada, a young Palestinian artist living in Paris. We are at Pit 420, which is a fantastic gallery from Bologna. And I was told by the galleries that the size of these works, the size of these drawings, are the maximum size that he can draw in his 15 square meter apartment studio in Paris. So interesting that we find this small connection on top of a connection that obviously has to do with we were talking about before, the tragedy of Gaza, and this is something that it's obviously directly reflected on the biography of this artist.
We both need new artists, I have to say.
This is what Artissima is for, right? The capacity
yes, that I like them all.
Reveal young artists.
The cartoonish style reminds us of Felix Gaston, because the artist was a children's book illustrator, so this element of his life comes alive in the drawing.
And you can see something happening. There's a movement, which is the thing there's also in Philippe Gaston. When you see the abstraction parts, it's always with a lot of different movement and brushes. Here you have all the elements. And this is a kind of play.
It's an origami, and it's kind of a contrast, because origami is something that is made by folding paper without cutting anything. But he has a scissor in his hands. And I was told that in his works, there's always like something that remains quite enigmatic, that is not declared. But this contrast is almost like an oxymoron.
You know what struck me here is, for me, this drawing has like an ascensional climax, because if we start from the right bottom, the drawing is a lot darker, and came to me the idea of childhood, because it's like a children illustration, so like the past. The men then represent a sort of suspension, is suspended, but at the end, we got the origami that is on top of the head. The origami is white. Origami always has a positive feeling, like it's either it's a bird, it's a swan, so brings hope. So for me, this is, it's concentrated in his permanent, in this actual state of suspension, but with a perspective of a desirable life coming from a very dark situation. That's
also the presence of the way it's drawn. I think it's super strong, because you have a body relationship, not because of the size, but because of all the the clay. It's risky.
You feel the instinct, the
It
gesture.
appears.
Beautiful. And I mean, as I asked to Caroline, like, but how, Stefania, you've been collecting for quite some time. What is it that that drew you to art? What was your first encounter that, you know, sort of made a difference in your passion for art?
I start collecting seriously when I moved to Brazil. And I started first with furniture, modernist furniture, because it was a way for me to discover Brazil and a great time in Brazil architecture. And from that on, I was trying to understand Brazilian society. And usually when you read newspapers, you don't get exactly the feeling that is among the people, the feeling of the society in itself. So I decided, why not through art? Usually artists, they give you the sense of what's going on, how they see the current situation, but also the way forwards. So that's how I started. And one of my first artwork, my first artwork was a Renata Lucas. Because, you know, it's related to architecture.
It's a bridge also. It's
course.
a bridge between, you know, your passion for architecture and design and art itself.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
it was art and surprise, because Renata Lucas, for me, it's an artist of surprises. Usually art is a source of surprises, but Renata Lucas, yes.
That's what you're looking for,
Yes.
at least. And this was definitely a surprise to me, if I have to say, because he's an artist that I didn't know. I mean, I know the gallery very well. We are with Chacha Levi, that has works between Paris and Milan. And yeah, I was really struck by this proposition.
So she's a Garance Pro. She's 33. The two young artists we chose were Helen Wigerso and her. I discovered her through a prize, which is with young artists in Paris. And she had a show with Chicha and a show at the Plateau where I used to work. And she's very involved with a kind of small community with the gay and the queer fashion, even if it's not the first thing. But all her work linked with body question, and something which I think is interesting as a woman artist to go to create a kind of eroticism, which is not the one depending of man.
The leather here is really worked as a sort of a camouflage, and this is a womb, like a female womb, which I think it's quite interesting that it has a scale that it's kind of almost monumental. I mean, it puts you in a position of looking from down to up. And, you know, I was talking to the galleries before, and they really kind of explained me how this comes from an autobiographical moment of her life where she's asking a lot herself, you know, kind of a certain fear for motherhood, and a certain kind of, you know, also the weight and the effort to live up to the expectations of motherhood, no?
Plus, no one said, but it's not so fun, and we can be totally depressed.
Absolutely.
And there's a lot of things which are not at all assumed. And also, there's all the question of how the body woman was changed by constraint, by fashion, by different kind of material, by makeup, by you can think of a happy moment as well as a disease moment, and the two are merged on one point.
And for me, what is really interesting, you know, it's a very unusual word for me, but is the clarity of such a discomfort that she has with stereotype related to the woman today. That usually is a debate between being a mother, fertility and care, and on the other is a woman with a sexual desire. It's very, the society makes a big difficulty in reconcile these two visions of the woman today, and I think she express it in a very nice way. And, you know, especially when she used this net represents like a cage or traps of the stereotype. So we can see that this, for example, in this is like a trap covering what is resemble a woman womb, where all these forms are baby toys. So it covered with net. Yes, and this other part for me is very fetish, so it reminds of sexual desire. So I think she feels this discomfort with these two stereotypes. That's what impressed me about this work. I'm happy the Caroline showed that.
Beautiful. Food for thoughts. And if we think of an art fair like Artissima, but art fairs in general, I mean, for you, Stefania, as a collector, and for you as a curator, Caroline, like, how do you feel that it's still valuable, the format of the fair? Like, I think you mentioned with us that Artissima, for example, has this focus on young propositions and the possibility to discover maybe works, even mediums like video, that is usually not
anymore.
That is not anymore present in art fairs because of the financial pressure to sell. So maybe this is
the quality here. There's some risk with the curated section in between design rediscovery, which you did since a long time. It's not the past 10 years as it is in most of the other fair now. And the risk of younger, there's not so much, because it's also economical question in some time. And here I think it's what I like is that it's a more conceptual fair. You allow people who help you to think, or it's not just a show off of objects, or not just to be powerful compared to the other one. It's not a...
I absolutely agree with Caroline, because you in Artissima has this aspect of the curatorial direction that's so predominant, that brings opportunity to talk, discuss, and so it feels less commercial than all the other fairs, in a very predominant way.
Okay, we arrive in front of your last proposition, which is wonderful, important figure of Italian art, Tomaso Binga. We are here at Fritelli, a gallery from Florence, my hometown. I'm very happy of this decision, and Milano. And so, what drew your attention to Tomaso Binga?
So I knew this artist, and when we stopped in front of his artwork, I see the great connection, because she works with language, and at the same time she's a feminist artist. But she reminds me of a famous movement in Brazil of the 60s. She worked a lot in the 70s, but in the 60s there's been a famous movement of literary and art that is the concrete poetry movement, and I think Tomaso Binga is very related to that. So she uses the language and the words, taking out the semantic meaning and focusing only on the visual of the sign. And what struck me is, in this case specifically, she uses a female naked body. And
her own body.
Exactly, it's her own body, so it's also the scale is as her height, as her dimensions, and she put it on sort of a pedestal to make it a monument. And it's actually very strong, because what she does here, she writes io, which is io in Italian is in English I. So it's a great act, politic and strong, powerful of act of being as a human, as a woman in the trying to reconquer her power in the language, but through the language in the society.
It's an alphabet.
It's an alphabet that then she used in several different works throughout all the decades. But in this case, I think it's interesting to say that it's a work that she finally managed to recontextualize in 2019, thanks to the invitation for Dior to do a catwalk. But I think it's interesting to say that she always wanted it to do it on this scale. She didn't have the financial means at the time to do it. And so... And
we discussed that a lot all together. But it's also, she changed it. She changed scales. She changed it with the pedestal. And she wants to make it even more strong with the pedestal. The idea of monument of
It's
what?
memory.
Memory.
It's victory. Also, we build monument remembering victory.
It's a reference to the Olympic Stadium in Rome, no? Where you have men bodies that are celebrated for their, in a classical forms, but women's are not present. And this is definitely a body that is a real body. It's not an idealized body. It's a body of a real woman with its beautiful imperfections also.
And what is for me very striking is the fact that the body of the women are used to looked at. Here, with this statement, they're not more looked at, but becomes a protagonist of the action. So it's really an empowerment, a strong empowerment, especially in a feminist movement.
And I think it's nice to discover for me it was a discovery here. I mean, feminism is important for all of us, and it's still important for all of us. I mean, still a necessity. So it was nice because often you encounter different different country, but with the same urgencies. That's, I think, was super nice.
Well, maybe I think on the note that the urgency of feminism and on the urgency of remind us how this is important. I'm the son of a feminist woman, so definitely something that my mom would be proud for me to say and address. I think we can close this beautiful walkie-talkie.
Thank you
Thank
very
you so
much
much
for the invitation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.